That's how you become enlightened. Shall we start? Yes. So, welcome everybody to this evening lecture here in the lecture hall and on Crowdcast. It is, as you hear, in English, and it's translated to Deutsch and to Danish. And the topic for this evening is mental illnesses or evolutionary crises. And here we study spiritual science. We have the spirit, the consciousness as the primary aspect of life. And everything in matter is a result of the longing and the creation of a consciousness. It's very easy to see, if we look at a chair or a piano, that it is somebody who has had a wish and an intelligence and been creative enough to create these things. But Martinus says that the intelligence that is everywhere in nature, we can see how ingeniously the flowers are constructed. And if we look at our physical body, it's a fantastic construction that can move in different ways, and all the organs are cooperating in a fantastic way. And this incarnated intelligence is a result of a consciousness. My body is streamed, so to say, by my consciousness, and all of you, and the bushes, and the organs, and the planets, all these types of organisms, big and small, they are streamed, so to say, from the spiritual level. So that's the primary aspect of life, is our consciousness. So when we look at mental illnesses and physical illnesses, they are also a result of our consciousness. It is something we create. It's not that we, by an act of will, is creating an illness. We want to have an illness. But it is different forces within our consciousness that creates these illnesses. It's kind of conflicts in different aspects, different longings. And as we know from our bad conscience, there is a conflict that can create a lot of tension within us. And we have a lot of habitual thinking that is unconscious for us. And here you can say that illnesses is a way to show us things in our consciousness. In a way, a help for us to investigate the deeper aspects in our consciousness and to release different aspects of our personality and grow. So in the school of life, illnesses is a compulsory subject or topic that we all have to go through. And the consciousness can also be seen from the physical level as an electric force in our body. So if we study biology, we see a lot of electrical impulses in our body. And that's the presence of the consciousness. And that's the driving force. That's the life force streaming through our body. And we have this evolution from the animal kingdom to the real human kingdom. And that represents two very, very different moral standards or relations to life. In the animal kingdom, it's the killing principle that is necessary to survive and have your being. And in the real human kingdom, it's the opposite. It is a neighborly love that is the basic energy, so to say, for our way of living and living a good life. And we have both these aspects within us. And they are easy to see that they can easily come into conflict. So if we have a rage of anger, for instance, it doesn't harmonize with our humane ideals that we have been studying in a way for 2,000 years in the Christian culture, and also in other religions. We have had these humane ideals that we've been studying for a long time, and lifetime through lifetime it has been growing. In fact, a little Christ being, so to say, a humane aspect in us. And it can collide with our automatic reactions of anger and jealousy and so on. And here we have a very deep foundation to understand illnesses. It is kind of short circuits in our electrical system that creates these different types of illnesses. Let us then ask, what is the purpose of illnesses? The first aspect I will put forward is that when we have experienced an illness, we are growing in compassion. When you see people work at hospitals or helping other beings with illnesses or abuse or anything, those who are really compassionate and are the best helpers are those who have been there before, if not in this lifetime, in past lifetimes. Because you have to have a similar experience to be able to understand their situation. So when you understand them, not only with your brain, but with your heart, it is a result of the fact that you have been in illnesses or abuse, for instance. So that is a very, very important aspect in the school of life, that we create a body of feeling and compassion towards our fellow beings. Another aspect that is also kind of a purpose or possibility when we look at illnesses is to be aware of the different mental forces that we have within us. Martinus tells us about these 6 basic energies, and he says that they are streaming through, so to say. They are permeating different parts of the body. So in this symbol where we see the small stars that we are in fact, you know it from the atoms, that there's so much space between the electrons and the kernel in the atoms. So we are filled with space. And the space is not empty space, it's our consciousness that permeates the whole body. And he says that the green color that represents intelligence, it is mainly dominating here in the brain and in the nervous system. The yellow is dominating the heart, the blood, and the lung system. And the orange with the energy of gravity, it is dominating in the digestive system. And the sexual area is dominated by the energy of intuition, where we have this contact with a higher world, you could say, in an automatic way through our sexual organs. That's why it is such a strong force within our to have pleasant experiences. And then we have the indigo. It represents our bones and our hair and nails. And the red energy is dominating the muscles and the skin. And that makes also kind of a possibility to understand what's going on in my consciousness. What are the conflicts when we, for instance, have problems with our lung and our heart? What are the conflicts in relation to the other energies in our system when this area of feeling is in conflict or gives illnesses? And we'll come back to that later. And another very important purpose with illnesses is to be more aware of the universe that we have within us. This, you could say, in a way, it is like a machine that we are using. But this machine is not a mechanical, mineral stuff, so to say. It is organs, cells, molecules, and we go further down into microcosmos, that are also living lives as we are. So through illnesses, we have a growing communication and awareness in our body. Through spiritual science, we also learn that these organs and cells, they are from a life experience perspective just as big as we are. That means an organ has its life experience as we do. The cells do too. It's kind of illusion to think that they are smaller than us. That's a physical perspective. It's like when we are out on the road, it seems to get smaller and smaller, the road. And it seems like the organs and cells and molecules are smaller and smaller, but they are just as big as us when you are in that cosmos, and their life experience is just as differentiated as ours. And spiritual science can help us to move our compassion into the body, and illnesses creates an awareness, a longing to be a better providence for this universe, because we are like gods for this universe. And the thoughts we use, the feelings we have, what we eat, how we use our body, it influences this universe. And of course, studying these analysis, we get a longing to be a better providence, because it's the same principle of a living being. With its eye, it has its organs, for instance, and the organs, the cells, and it's also living beings into living beings. The principle of life units is symbolized here. So we are getting more and more aware and compassionate, and gets a longing to be a good mother and father for all the living beings within us. What's so the purpose with pain? That this education is at times of a painful nature is simply because, cosmically speaking, it also has to act as a danger signal. It is like a bell that rings when the individual is going astray. And the more the individual strays from the natural way, the louder will it ring. From a cosmic aspect, all the pain in the world, physical as well as mental, constitutes therefore the greatest form of protection for all living beings. And that's a very interesting connection with pain, to say that it is a protection. How could that be? Well, I think it's very easy for us to understand when it comes to the physical body. Because if my hand and arm would be totally numb, and I have no sensation through my nervous system, and I would stay at home and put my hand on a hot plate on the stove, I wouldn't feel anything. After a while, I would wonder, what's the smell in here? Is somebody frying a flesh or a chicken or something? What's the smoke that comes up? And then it's my hand that is totally burned. That would be the result if we didn't have these signals in the physical body. So it's really a protection. Could it be the same thing with the soul? That when we have feelings of depression or anxiety, that it's also signals from the souls that tells us that there's something wrong. There is a conflict going on that we can be aware of, and this awareness can help us to create a better life. So pain is in many ways a help for us. But how do we relate to pain in our culture today? We live in a very materialistic culture and worldview, and it also influences the way we look at illnesses and also pain in the soul. And we have created a fantastic industry when it comes to chemistry that can create very good painkillers. And that is very, very good. I'm very happy if my tooth, for example, is aching a lot, that I can have some painkillers, or my head, or if I have an operation. So that is really a humane thing. But is it the same with the soul, that we also there have a lot of chemicals that can press down, you could say, a depressive state or anxiety, so that we don't have to feel the pain from the soul? And as we understand, there is a dilemma in this approach. When we have this, could say, conflict on focusing on the symptoms or focusing on the causes, it could be that if we are too eager to just press down the pain in the soul or in the body, we are kind of getting numb in the way of listening to the speech of life, to our micro beings that are telling a story about a conflict, for instance, in our soul, or the way we have in our lifestyle. So it is really a dilemma in the medicine of today. And if we look at the mental problems, for instance, like depression, we see that to be able to communicate around the world in psychiatry, we had to find a system of diagnosis that could be common around the world. And there was a big problem, and that was that there were so many theories of the causes to depression. Some say it's only chemicals in your brain. And some say it is your childhood. And some say it's your family life. And we can go on and go on. There are many different theories about why we, for instance, get a depression. So to be able to be united around the world, they had to move the focus from the causes to the symptoms. It was much easier to measure the symptoms, the way you behave. If you are very low in the mood for an amount of weeks, and if you maybe lose weight or go up in weight or sleep bad or too much or too little and so on, and you have different criteria to see and get the diagnosis of a depression. The problem then is that if you take it very materialistic, then you see that a depression is a lack of serotonin in the brain, and you need to have some pills to get out of this depressive state. That could be a help in some times. But from my point of view, it's very big risk if you only do that, because there is a teaching in every state of consciousness. There's a purpose with everything we go through. And there is a gift in every state of consciousness. It's a story that has to be told to us. So, if we look at depression, we can easily see that there could be so many different causes. It could be a grief that is not worked on, so to say. It could be pressed down because you have had too much to do and you couldn't really stop up and take care of your grief. It could also be, for many people today, that they don't see any purpose and meaning in life. There's an existential crisis that makes you depressed. It could also be a lack of B12. It could be a very bad food if you eat junk food all the time. And I can continue and give many different causes to a state of depression where the signal from the soul is telling there is something wrong. It could both be physical and mental and relational things or spiritual things that could make you come into this state. Therefore, we see it's so important to really investigate why do you have this state in your consciousness. It's not only a lack of pills, there's another cause that you have to investigate. And now I've forgotten who said these words, but they are smart, I think. That's why I use them. Why do you want to recover from your illness? Is it because you want to go back to the lifestyle that made you sick? And that is a risk in our culture, where we look at illnesses only more materialistic way. That if you get this medicine, you can go back and live the same way. For instance, with your eating or your relational problems or your lack of inspiration at work and so on. That could be the cause of your depression. So that is a risk also with many other illnesses, heart conditions or whatever, all illnesses. They have something to tell us, and it's important not only to take down the symptoms, that could be necessary, but always to investigate. Why am I sick? What can I do to change to get a better life? And spiritual science is oriented towards the causes. And let us start with the main cause that we already have briefly talked about. It is this that is the main cause of our different illnesses and conflicts in soul and body, that we are this refugee between two worlds. We come from the animal kingdom, and we've been living here with the killing principle, and it is an automatic function. When we feel threatened, for instance, we get this burst of anger, or we have this fear and so on. We are like animals that have to survive, and then we sometimes habitually go into these destructive manners that we also see a lot of around the planet today. So it's a history, but it can be activated in things of situations of threat. And then we have this growing, you could say, Christ being, or humane aspect of us, with forgiveness as the ideal relation to what happens of conflicts in your life. And Martinus points at this in this quote in this way. It's an article, What is animosity? Vad är fiendskap på dansk? None of the doctors in the world has been able to find the medicine that can abolish the animosity and thereby the process of mental depravity that works against the cure of any disease. What is the use of being able to patch up some of the effects of certain diseases and illnesses when one does not put an end to the only real evil thing, that which is, in fact, the principal cause of all sufferings and illnesses? So that is the very fundamental aspect, this conflict. And we also know from our own experience, I think, that if we have an illness, when we have a lot of stress, it's always nearly getting worse, this illness. And stress is also a release of the energy of gravity that explodes within us and creates a tension. So that's an easy way to localize this force within us when we are talking about stress as we do, but also, as we will come back to, when it comes to anger and all different types of animosity. Martinus has made a lot of symbols about the causes of illnesses, and I will just briefly mention a little bit about it. We have a lot of symbol explanations, both in English and Danish, about this. But he shows, as we saw the first symbol, that we have this system, this harmonious system, when the energies are on the right part of the body, so to say. But when we have illnesses, this electric system is kind of coming into these conflicts or short circuits where there's an energy from one of the systems that goes up in another system. So for instance, you see here the orange energy, the energy of gravity coming up to the energy of feeling in the heart and lung. And that is a result of too much of anger, for instance, and animosity. When it is overburdening on us and we are dwelling in that, it can be too much of it, and it can come up into the lung and heart area. And that's why this can also be an important aspect of the causes to lung infections and heart problems. And we know that from science about heart problems that anger is dangerous when it comes to heart problems. And from many, many years ago, I read about a study where they showed that they could help people with anger management and their heart problems were declining. And they worked directly with forgiveness to help them in this process. And another example is when the energy of feeling goes into the digestive system. That's, for instance, when we have a lot of worry, and we have too much responsibility at work, and we feel that we can't handle the situation. If we often go around in this feeling of being overburdened and worried about things, the energy of feeling can also kind of block the flow of the energy of gravity in our digestive systems. So we get problems with our digestive system, we get ulcers and so on. So these are two examples, but in the symbol book number 5, the Eternal Word Picture number 5, there are many symbols where Martinus explains them. It is not translated, but we see the short explanations at the homepage of martinus.dk in the English version. So you can read a little bit about all these descriptions he has about how the energies are coming into the wrong area and creates the foundation for the different illnesses that we are struggling with. So in that sense, as we said, there is a possibility for self-realization, to become aware of how the energies are going into the wrong areas, what mental forces, what thought climates are creating my illness. And the illness is, in fact, a possibility to learn to know yourself. And that was also something that Carl Gustav Jung was talking about. He says the following about neurosis. A neurosis is truly removed only when it has removed the false attitude of the ego. We do not cure it, it cures us. A man is ill, but the illness is nature's attempt to heal it. So we have this attitude that it is something, we are victims and we want to get rid of the illnesses, but it is a possibility to find, as Jung soon will tell us, to find the gold that is immanent in this illness, to realize something about yourself. So he continues the sentence with the following. And what the neurotic flings away as absolutely worthless contains the true gold we should never have found elsewhere. So when we live in a humane but very materialistic way of looking at things, at pain and illnesses, we often don't come in contact with the worth, the value of the illnesses. So it's very humane to lower the symptoms. And a lot of doctors, they also feel that it would be to put guilt on people if they say that it has something to do with your own way of living. But that is also like putting your head in the sand. If you don't search for the causes and the reasons, you will just continue with the illnesses and go back to the lifestyle that made you sick. It is a possibility to, in a very forgiving and scientific way, start to search what's going on in my consciousness, what's going on in my life, what is the help that I can get of these situations in life where illnesses or conflicts or relational problems comes up. And it's also interesting to relate this to our conscience. As we said in the beginning, bad conscience is a sign of a conflict between the animal and the humane side within us. And here Martinus says the following in The Mystery of Prayer, the book. He says, "It is the superiority of these alien forces we experience in the shape of guilty conscience, feelings of guilt, etc. It is, however, also the shift of the normal tilt of the axis caused by these forces, which is the basis of insanity, mental retardation, or in short, all mental defects. As for the guilty conscience or feeling of guilt, the fact is that the sufferer has discovered the abnormal mental shift." So here we see the importance of becoming aware in your conscience and the conflicts you have with bad conscience, to understand what's going on and research this. Otherwise, if we just press it down, it will usually formulate itself because in illnesses or anxiety or depression and so on. So it's better to be good at listening to your conscience because it has a story to tell. And that is a big, big problem in this materialistic way of living and in the world culture of today. We know from experience that if we get very angry, we can be kind of possessed of this feeling. And we can say and do things that really gives us bad conscience afterwards. And we can be shocked by the way we behave when we are in this outburst of anger. And what's going on the planet right now? Aren't there a lot of outbursts of anger where people are doing things that they really will regret in the future? Isn't it, when we look at the story of the military people, soldiers from Vietnam or Iraq and so on, that there are more soldiers that have made suicide than have been killed in the wars? How come? Because they have been possessed by forces that have pressed down their conscience, down to the, what Martinus called, night consciousness, or we will call in psychology the unconscious. So they don't listen to the voice, if you call it the Christ voice or the humane voice within. It's kind of blocked. And we will look at some sayings from Martinus, some quotes from Martinus, where it describes why we are in this state of consciousness right now. And he relates it deeply to this materialistic worldview. We have been studying religions and humane ideals in many lifetimes. Now it's not something up on the agenda, so to say. It is matter, it's money, it's politics, and so on. And that can also press down the listening to the conscience. And we will look at this with, for instance, this quote, where he talks about the cause of our present war psychosis. As we said before, when we don't listen to our conscience, we can come into different mental disorders. And that's, as we can see from this point of view, is going on with this war psychosis right now on this planet. He says the following: "This monster is none other than the mental concept that man calls nationalism. So nationalism is by no means the attractive ideal it is supposed to be, but is intrinsically a psychosis, a mental derangement that will gradually lay civilization waste if the worship of it is not effectually checked." And in another article, Martinus talks about nationalism as a super religiosity. And it overrules even our religious ideals. So when people are into this flock, this herd consciousness, and go to war, and they feel the nation is threatened, they do a lot of things that is much under their moral standard in everyday life. And that really creates a conflict. And here we can see why this nationalistic idea, when it possesses people, it can put us into this war psychosis. It is in a way a psychosis to see this world now doing such enormously dangerous things towards our neighbors and killing all these people and so on. So it is really a derailment of our consciousness. Another article, he says, in relation to this, 1950, he said, "Indeed, we can even say that the majority of terrestrial mankind is actually at the beginning of a period of spiritual debauchery or misconduct, the likes of which we have never seen before, and is therefore in an epoch of spiritual illness or corresponding dimensions." So it's a spiritual illness when you don't have contact with your conscience, the humane ideals that you've been studying for many lifetimes before this lifetime. And he continues to look at this blocking of the knowledge we have in our humane aspect. He says, "It is also the faltering connective function with the talent kernels of the night consciousness for the normal standard of the individual that in many cases contributes to the individual being a psychopath in his waking day conscious appearance." So we can see humane beings going into these herd instinct, this nationalism and so on, and lose contact with their higher aspects. We can also see young people that are fairly humane. If they go into abuse of narcotics, we can see their moral standard can be lowered and decline, and they can do a lot of criminal things later in life. So when we get possessed of these different forces, they can really outrule the humane aspect that is pressed down in the unconscious, and we don't listen to our humane ideals, our conscience. So how can we come out of this state on this planet? He says, the only thing that can make these beings the real ideal state in their night consciousness regain a foothold in their waking day consciousness is the total defeat that this mental or spiritual illness inevitably entails for its originator. So when we see people going into war, they are in fact going into this total defeat. There is no victories on the fields of war anymore. It's so unpleasant, it is creating so much suffering for all people involved. So we have to come out of this possession of nationalism and war psychosis through a big defeat, a catastrophe. It could be the same thing in our personal life if we are very arrogant and are with some thoughts where we dominate other beings. Sooner or later, life will put a stop to this. It will be very painful. And an illness can be a part of this way that life is stopping us to stay still for a while and start to think, what am I doing? How can I do this in a better way? And in this time, Martinus shows that there is really a need for a spiritual science. We need to get contact with these humane ideals that are kind of blocked in our culture. And that's the purpose with spiritual science that we are studying here. Spiritual science will save the human being from the psychopathic sphere and bring the human being back to reality, the reality of the laws of life. We heard 2,000 years ago that we should put the sword in the sheath and so on. It's not a new thinking. We've heard it for a long time. Now we have to update this and make it us more aware of it, so we awaken from this suggestion of nationalism, capitalism, and so on. So let us, with that little macro perspective, go back to us as individuals and relate to an article that is called The Human Being's Mental Short Circuits, Kortslutning, where he describes this problem that we are standing in everyday life that creates our illnesses and conflicts. It says the following: but how can a natural state, that of being a transitional being, lead to something unnatural, such as mental short circuits, stress, mental breakdown, ulcers, heart conditions, cancer, and much more, owing to the fact that the human being creates excessive tensions in his nervous system? And now there come three aspects that he states. And the first one is either by fanatically demanding too much of himself all at once. Have you tried that? Somebody? There is a reason why many have this burnout syndrome, for instance. But that's one way we can, the extra tension can express itself. And it can also be in other illnesses. As we know, stress is a very also investigated area in our medical life, where we see it is really a burden for our health with a lot of stress. And in this time of, you could say, economism, where money is the god to say, and when companies and industries are pressing all the time, so we have to be productive all the time, we should cut down on the staff and we should do more and more on each minute. It's very easy to have this pressure on yourself. And your self-worth is related to how much money you get and what prestige you get in the workplace and so on. So this is really an important aspect of why we have too much tensions in our nervous system. And the second one, the Martinus states, is or by giving in also excessively to jealousy, envy, anger, irritation, disappointment, and other such mental climates consisting of coarse thought matter, the material that makes up the human being's nerve fibers and certain other organs, and which at present habitually vibrates on the wavelengths with a person's constructive ideas and humane feeling, is broken down by the coarse vibration. That was a long sentence. So it's important to become aware of what feelings we have, if we have anger and jealousy and so on, and take that to yourself and look at it and so on. But it's quite another thing to dwell in it or to give it nourishment in our victim consciousness or so on. So here to be aware of these primitive feelings that we have and try to constructively release them and work constructively, gently towards a more forgiving relation to ourselves and our surroundings. That's very important, because these tough, primitive energies is too strong and coarse for our nervous system, so that also can create illnesses. And here I will just take a little other quote into this to stress what we just read. It's from a lecture, My Relation to God, where I have made a transcription and Maria translated it. He says, down in the animal is the natural aptitude, also these mental forces with jealousy and anger and so on. For they are, of course, one-pole beings, but for the developed human being, who is far advanced in the development of the poles, it is almost a disease to become hot-tempered. It is a disease to be intolerant. It is a disease to go around feeling hatred. And it contributes to undermining real health. So it does not help that you're a vegetarian and in every other way try to care for your body if you destroy it when you have a lot of these thoughts. So it is just a matter of trying to become a peaceful being. Look at what grim tendencies you have, and you can also think about whether Christ would do that. So, of course, it's very good to become a vegetarian and live a healthy life. But if you continue with these animal thought climates, it doesn't help your health enough. So, looking here also at the last sentence, and you can also think about whether Christ would do that. Martinus used that meditation, you could say. Would Christ do that? And he immediately, with his latent cosmic consciousness, got an answer. It's not so easy for us, but it is a good training because we have a growing Christ being within us. All the humane ideals and talents is a growing Christ aspect in us. So to meditate, would Christ do that? It can help us to listen to the conscience that maybe have been blocked for a long time because of the strivings in the physical world and the materialism, the economic thinking of today. So to have that as a meditation, what would Christ do, is a way to connect with your main ideals, with your conscience. So let's go back to the third aspect in this article about the human being's mental short circuits. It says, from one incarnation to the next, it is also possible to sow the seeds of destructive fate by destroying, through excessive consumption of alcohol, tobacco, or narcotics, one's talent kernels for building up a new physical body. We know that tobacco is creating illnesses. We know also that alcohol is also making our health decline. We know narcotics also do that and also can give psychotic states of consciousness. What Martinus then helps us to see is a broader perspective. When we have reincarnation, if we have been misusing ourselves with these drugs, so to say, we deteriorate or we hurt or damage the talent kernels for building up a healthy body the next lifetime. So health is a question not only of the lifestyle and thought climates in this incarnation, it is a continuous process over many lifetimes. So many people that have illnesses when they are young, well, that's the constitution that they have with them from the past lifetime. When I, for instance, as a 13-year-old, started to try to smoke and be cool with the friends of mine, I very quickly started to get asthma. For me, that was the pain that helped me to stop smoking. But the reason why I so easily got these problems with asthma is probably because I've been smoking in past lifetimes. So I didn't have the health capacity to handle this for a longer period, a very short period, in fact. And we'll come back to that soon. But first I want to look at the cycle of natural desires. if we are hungry, we go and eat. We eat food, and after a while we are satiated. That's enough, and we don't want to eat more. It would be unpleasant to put any more food within you, because enough is enough. But we know after a while we get hungry again, and we have to eat again. And it's the same thing with our needs on the soul level, so to say. If we find a fantastic movie and we look at it once, and I think Sören mentioned similar examples this morning, that if we continue to eat spaghetti, I think it was, but if we look at the film each evening, evening after evening after evening, we will also get satiated and feel, I don't want to see that anymore. And we can lift that even up further and say, these fantastic athletics in the Olympic Games, like a Duplantis jumping, what do you call? Pole vault. He cannot keep on doing that for many lifetimes. Because if you are a genius, you don't learn anymore, and you get satiated, and you want to do something else. And I know you, Mary, have seen some ingenious violinists, young people, and when they are 17, 18 years old, they think, okay, I know that, I want to be an electric engineer. They change the career to something else because they are satiated. And that is the beauty of life, you could say, that when you have done something enough, there's a new horizon that opens up. So you get a new longing, a new hunger, and you satisfy that, and that's life. It continues. So sometimes we are afraid, I want to do this the rest of my life. But then you feel, okay, it's not so funny anymore. Just open up, there will soon come a new longing. And that is the way that we have evolved through this animal kingdom with our new desires, our new longings. And this is a process of natural desires. But there are also unnatural desires, Martinus says. And the satisfaction of unnatural desires, well, as I see it, there are two different types of it. And the first one I want to look at is the disharmony with our step of evolution. And as we say, going to war for most soldiers today is really to ask for a bad condition in your psyche for a long time, for most of them, with many have PTSD and so on. They are not Vikings anymore. They don't have that coarse mentality. They are too sensitive to be in that place. And that is, with nationalism, a desire that creates people going into some very unnatural states. But there's another aspect, and that is the harmful stimulants. We said tobacco, alcohol, narcotics. They have a big problem and issue. There is no satiation of alcohol, for instance. That's why you become an alcoholic. Or where the people using drugs, they can't stop it because you cannot be satisfied. It just urges for more and more, and you become the slave of this drug. What is it then that stops us? Well, it is the catastrophe. It is the consequences of the drugs, that your relations are going apart and are destroyed. You lose contact with your family. Your economic situation is destroyed, and so on, and your health is destroyed. That, the consequences of the drug, is what is stopping you. And that's why it's not a natural cycle when it comes to these unnatural, harmful stimulants. It has to go into a catastrophe, and there you stop, and you sooner or later got the longing to create a better life. So let us continue and look at the cycle of illnesses. This is a way of describing that from 0 to 100, that we can have a health capital, so to say. With all the instincts in the animal kingdom, they live a perfect life in relation to their health. They eat what they should eat and so on. But that's not what we see with humans. We eat a lot of things that are not really food. We drink a lot of things that are really not nourishing us and so on. So we have kind of pressed down and burdened our health capital, so it's declining. And that is the cause of why we are receptive to illnesses. And in the beginning, with illnesses, there is a phase of cause. There's a cause. And if I have catch a cold, for instance, the cold, it takes maybe some days before I get the symptoms. So the first phase, we don't really realize that we have catched a cold. And it's the same thing with the people smoking. They don't have any symptoms, so they think it's fine. There's nothing stopping them because it's so pleasant with the alcohol and so on. But sooner or later, the health capital has declined, and we come to a phase of the cycle of illnesses where we get these symptoms. And in the first phase, here, we are still kind of a victim of the symptoms. We don't understand why, so we continue with the lifestyle of the mental climates, and maybe we also feel like a victim for the doctors and so on, and we don't really take the responsibility for our health. They can help me. But sooner or later in this process, we will come to the turning point where we start to understand that maybe it has something to do with me, my lifestyle, what I eat, what I drink, how I think, how I feel, how I create my relationships. And that's the turning point when we take an active part of the healing process. So if we come to this phase of recovery, we have started to learning a lot. But maybe a person that after the process of a couple of lifetimes with, for instance, drinking, have come into this symptom phase and start to recover. If that person meets a person that is up here, this person smoking, drinking, say, you live so healthy, but look, you are so sick. And I'm so healthy, and I can drink. Why don't you just take a smoke and so on? And who is the healthiest from a cosmic point of view? Where the consciousness has grown so much, so this person is much more healthy, even though he has or she has symptoms from the lifestyle from a period of many lifetimes maybe. But this person will continue its process, and there will sooner or later in this lifetime or the next lifetime, they will regain health and become the best helpers to help the persons that are going through this process that they have gone through. That is the best school of life, to be the best nurse or doctor or helpers to abusing people. So we have to come to this point where we realize that everything I create comes from within. I have talent kernels, I have habits in everyday life, and I am the one to recreate these, to regain health from within. This is our super consciousness, the element of fate, the talent kernels during incarnation. The arrows is showing that this person is now incarnating. And he says in relation to this symbol, he says, the symbol shows the highest field. We cannot get any further in. Here we are at the very heart of the superconsciousness, where it all has its beginning and where all disease must be fought. Until one can awake day consciously, fight it right inside oneself, one cannot have reached true perfection. So the body that we incarnate in, symbolized here with the orange field, is a result of the talent kernels that we are building up or have damaged in past lifetimes. So it's not a punishment, it is a consequence. It's a learning process that makes us more awake of the laws of life and how to create health and be a good providence for our micro beings. And in one article it says, it is a question of knowledge, will and character. Knowledge, that's a process of many, many, many lifetimes that we go through. And when we have this compassion, this body of feeling has grown by virtue of all these illnesses, it gives a motivation. It creates a strong will to create a lifestyle, a way of thinking and relating to our neighbors and so on, that we also, through maybe have gone through these problems with drugs and so on, have had to use the will with guided by reason to be able to create a strong character, so we are not influenced by people who want to draw us into other lifestyles that we know by our heart will result in illnesses. So it is a process of many lifetimes. And this new word picture, this spiritual worldview that wants us to connect with our conscience, the neighborly love that is growing within us, says that the illnesses medicine number 1 is represented with this symbol, but also in this last quote in this lecture, where he says, "What is important is what Christ has said, that one gets rid of the habit of criticizing and being impatient with one's neighbor. What one does not like about his nature, one must understand by observing oneself. Forgiving and thinking lovingly about one's enemies is the highest form of yoga, and it infallibly leads to cosmic consciousness with its miraculous powers, its omniscience, omnipotence, and universal love." Thank you.